The heavy oak doors of St. Augustine's Church creaked as Margaret pushed them open. The afternoon sun filtered through stained glass windows, casting colourful shadows across the empty pews. She hadn't been to confession in 20 years, but today she needed someone to hear her story. Someone who couldn't judge her the way everyone else would. Father Michael was sitting in the confessional, his silhouette visible through the ornate wooden screen. Margaret's hands trembled as she entered the booth, the familiar scent of incense and old wood bringing back memories of her childhood, when her father would bring her here every Sunday. "Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned," she began, her voice barely a whisper. "It's been 2 decades since my last confession, and I don't even know where to begin." "Take your time, my child," Father Michael's gentle voice responded. "God listens with infinite patience." Margaret took a deep breath. "Father, I'm planning a party. A $240,000 celebration for my 60th birthday. It's supposed to be the event of my life, everything I've worked for, everything I've achieved. 500 guests, the Plaza Hotel, champagne from France, flowers flown in from Ecuador. But Father, I don't want my father there." The priest remained silent, allowing her to continue. "You might think I'm a terrible daughter. What kind of person spends $240,000 on a party but won't invite their own father? But Father Michael, you don't know what he did. You don't know what that man took from me. Have you ever had to make a choice between family obligation and protecting your own peace?" The weight of her decision pressed down on Margaret's shoulders as she continued her confession. "When I was 7 years old, my mother died of cancer. Everyone said my father was a saint for raising me alone. The whole church, this very church, praised him. Such a devoted father, they'd say. Look how he sacrifices for his little girl. But behind closed doors, Father Michael, behind those doors." Margaret's voice cracked. She pulled a tissue from her purse, the designer bag a stark contrast to the humble confessional booth. "He didn't hit me, if that's what you're thinking. No, what he did was worse. He stole my childhood, Father. Every achievement, every moment of joy, every friend I made, he poisoned it all. When I got straight A's, he'd tell me I was showing off, that I thought I was better than him. When I made friends, he'd whisper lies about them until I believed everyone was against me. When boys showed interest in high school, he'd convince me they only wanted to use me." The confession booth felt smaller now. The air thick with decades of pain, finally being released. But the worst part, Father, the absolute worst part, was the night before my wedding. I was 23, marrying Robert, the only man who'd ever fought through my father's poison to love me anyway. That night, my father came to my room and told me my mother's real last words. For 16 years, he'd told me she said she loved me, that she wanted me to be happy. But that night he laughed and said he'd lied. He said my mother's last words were actually about how disappointed she was that I wasn't the son she'd prayed for. Father Michael's sharp intake of breath was audible through the screen. "I found out years later, Father, through my aunt, who was there when my mother passed, that he'd lied about the lie. My mother's last words really were of love for me. He just wanted to break me one more time before I left his control. And it worked. I walked down that aisle believing my own mother died, disappointed in my existence. What would you have done in that moment? Would you have confronted him? Would you have walked away?" Margaret had chosen silence, but it had eaten at her for 37 years. "Robert helped me build a life despite it all. We have 3 beautiful children, Father. A successful business. A home filled with love. Everything my father said I'd never have. And now, for my 60th birthday, I want to celebrate everything I've overcome. Every therapist appointment, every night I cried myself to sleep, every moment I chose to be a better parent than he ever was. I want to celebrate it all." She paused, looking at the crucifix visible through the screen. "The $240,000 party isn't about showing off, Father. Each dollar represents something I reclaimed. The venue is the Plaza, because he told me I'd never be welcome in places like that. The champagne is French, because he said I had no class. The designer dress is because he told me I was ugly. Every single detail is a victory over his voice in my head. Father Michael shifted in his seat. And your father now? Is he still living? Oh, yes, Margaret laughed bitterly. He's 84 now in a nursing home. Still sharp as ever, still cruel as ever. Last month, when I visited, he looked at my grandson and told him he had his great-grandmother's nose. Then added, hopefully not her weakness, he's poisoning a third generation. Father, the church bells chimed 4 o'clock. Their sound echoing through the empty church. My siblings say I'm being cruel. They say he's old, that he's family, that the party will be the talk of the city, and how can I not invite him? They didn't live through what I did. He was different with them, the sons he wanted. They got the father everyone else saw, the saint who raised his children alone. Margaret pulled out her phone, showing the priest through the screen a photo of the invitation. Gold embossed letters on cream paper, the kind of elegant invitation her father had always said was for people who think they're better than they are. 200 of those invitations have been sent, Father. Politicians, CEOs, everyone who ever doubted me because of the insecurity he planted. But not one to him. Am I a sinner for that? Am I wrong to protect my celebration from the man who tried to destroy every celebration I've ever had? What do you think? Is blood really thicker than water when that blood has been poisoned? Father Michael was quiet for a long moment. My child, forgiveness is not about allowing someone to continue hurting you. It's about freeing yourself from the burden of their actions. But Father, he's never once apologized. Never once acknowledged what he did. When I tried to talk to him about it 5 years ago, he laughed and said I was being dramatic, that I should be grateful he kept me after Mom died. Grateful, as if raising your own child is some kind of charity. Margaret's voice rose with emotion, echoing slightly in the confessional. I've built an empire, Father. The catering company I started in my garage now serves half of Manhattan's elite events. My children are doctors and teachers and artists. I've given more to charity than my father made in his entire lifetime. And still when I close my eyes, I hear him telling me, I'm nothing. She pulled out another photo, this one of her family at last Christmas. 3 children, 5 grandchildren, all gathered around her and Robert, all smiling genuinely. This is what I built despite him, Father. This is what love really looks like. And I absolutely won't let him stand in that ballroom, accepting congratulations for raising such a successful daughter when he did everything in his power to ensure I'd fail. The priest spoke carefully. Have you considered that perhaps the party isn't really about him at all? That maybe this is about you finally choosing yourself? Margaret nodded, tears flowing freely now. That's exactly what my therapist said. She said that $240,000 isn't excessive if it's buying me freedom. And you know what? She's right. Every person at that party will be someone who sees me for who I really am, not the broken girl my father tried to create. But Father, my cousin called yesterday. She said my father has been telling everyone at the nursing home about his daughter's big party. He's been bragging about how successful I am, taking credit for my achievements. The staff thinks he's such a proud father. It makes me sick, can you imagine? The audacity of claiming credit for someone you tried to destroy? There's more, Father. Last week I hired a private investigator. I don't know why. Maybe I needed to know if I was crazy, if I'd imagined it all. Do you know what they found? Letters. Dozens of letters my mother wrote to me before she died that he never gave me. Letters full of love and hope and dreams for my future. He kept them in a safety deposit box like trophies. Father Michael's voice was thick with emotion. My child, that is deeply cruel. The investigator also found something else. My father has been rewriting history with everyone who will listen. He tells people I was a difficult child, that he sacrificed everything for me, that my success is because of his tough love. He's created an entire mythology where he's the hero and I'm the ungrateful daughter. Margaret stood up in the confessional, pacing the small space. The party is in 3 weeks, Father. 3 weeks to decide if I'm strong enough to stand by my decision. My publicist says the media will notice if he's not there. The family patriarch missing from the social event of the season. There will be questions, but you know what? Let them ask. Maybe it's time someone told the truth about perfect fathers who aren't so perfect. She sat back down heavily. I came to confession because I wanted someone to tell me I'm wrong, that I should invite him, that I should be the bigger person. But sitting here telling you everything, I realize something. Being the bigger person doesn't mean being a doormat. It doesn't mean giving your abuser another chance to abuse you. Do you agree? Or do you think family should always come first, no matter what? Father, he called me last night. First time in 6 months. Do you know what he said? He asked what time the little party was, and said he supposed he could make an appearance if it wasn't too late in the evening, as if he was doing me a favor. $240,000, the celebration of my life, and he calls it a little party. Margaret laughed, but it was without humor. My husband Robert has been my rock through all of this. He said something yesterday that stopped me cold. He said, "Margaret, you've spent your whole life trying to prove your father wrong. Maybe it's time to stop trying and just live." And he's right, Father. This party isn't about proving anything to my father. It's about celebrating the life I built in spite of him. The confession booth felt warmer now, as if the act of speaking her truth had changed the very air around her. I've decided to do something with the party, Father. For every guest who attends, I'm donating $1,000 to a charity that helps children escape abusive homes. That's on top of the party cost. Because maybe if I can help even one child avoid what I went through, maybe that's worth more than any family obligation. Father Michael spoke softly. That is a beautiful way to transform pain into purpose. But here's the thing that haunts me, Father. What if he shows up anyway? What if someone tells him the details and he just appears? I've hired security, but how do you explain to a room full of society's elite that you're having your own father escorted out? Margaret's phone buzzed with a text from her daughter. "Mom, Grandpa just called me asking about your party." I didn't tell him anything, but he's getting suspicious. My children understand, Father. They've seen enough of his behavior to know why I'm doing this. But they're also scared of the family fallout. My brother hasn't spoken to me since I told him Father wasn't invited. He says I'm destroying the family, that our mother would be ashamed. She pulled out one more photo, this one old and faded. It showed a young woman holding a baby, both smiling at the camera. This is the only photo I have of my mother and me together where my father isn't in the frame. The investigator found it in those hidden documents. She's looking at me with such love, Father. Such pure, uncomplicated love. That's what I want at my party. People who look at me and see me, really see me, not the version of me my father tried to create. What would your mother want for you? It's a question that haunts so many of us, isn't it? You know what the saddest part is, Father? I'm successful, wealthy, loved and accomplished, and I still feel like that 7-year-old girl being told she's not enough. That's his true crime. He didn't just steal my childhood. He planted seeds of doubt that grew into a forest I've spent my whole life trying to cut down. The church had grown quiet around them, the late afternoon sun casting longer shadows through the stained glass. Last month, my granddaughter, she's 6, she came to me crying because a boy at school said she wasn't pretty. And as I held her, telling her she was beautiful and smart and perfect just as she is, I realized I was giving her what I never got. And in that moment, Father, I forgave myself for not inviting my father. Because keeping him away from my party isn't about punishing him. It's about protecting the sacred space I've created for healing. Father Michael cleared his throat. My child, it seems to me you've already found your answer. You're not seeking permission. You're seeking peace with a decision you've already made. You're right, Father. I guess I just needed to say it all out loud to someone who would listen without judgment. My father took so much from me, but he won't take this. This $240,000 party, as excessive as it might seem, is my declaration of independence. It's my way of saying I survived, I thrived, and I did it without him. Margaret stood up again, this time with purpose. The party will have everything, Father. A 10-piece orchestra playing the songs my mother loved, the ones my father said were too sophisticated for us. A 7-course meal prepared by the chef my father said would never cook for someone like me. Speeches from the CEOs who mentored me, the ones my father said were just using me. And at the center of it all, I'll stand in a $30,000 gown, not because I need to prove anything, but because I can. Because that little girl who was told she was nothing became everything he said she couldn't be. Have you ever had a moment where you realized your success was the best revenge? Father, I need to tell you about the speech I'm planning to give at the party. I'm going to talk about my mother, about the letters I never received, about the love that was hidden from me. But I'm also going to talk about choosing to build rather than destroy, about how the absence of something can sometimes be the greatest gift you can give yourself. She paused, collecting her thoughts. I won't mention my father by name. I won't give him that power. But everyone will know. In this city, everyone always knows. And maybe that's okay. Maybe it's time for the truth to be more powerful than the facade. The priest spoke gently. Confession is about unburdening yourself, my child. Do you feel lighter? I do, Father. For the first time in years, I actually do. You know what? I'm going to add one more thing to the party. A moment of silence for all the children who don't have a voice, who are living through what I lived through. And during that silence, I'll think of my father, not with hatred but with pity, because he'll never know what real love feels like. He'll never understand the joy of building someone up instead of tearing them down. Margaret gathered her things, preparing to leave. The invitations are already sent, Father. The deposit is paid. The dress is being fitted as we speak. In 3 weeks, I'll celebrate 60 years of life, 37 years of marriage, 3 children, 5 grandchildren, and 1 massive victory over the voices that tried to silence me. And my father, he'll be exactly where he chose to be, on the outside of love, looking in. She moved toward the door of the confessional, then stopped. Father, do you think my mother knows? Wherever she is, do you think she knows I made it? Do you think she's proud? Father Michael's voice was warm. I think, my child, that love transcends death. And I think any mother would be proud of a daughter who chose healing over hatred, who built beauty from brokenness. Margaret smiled. The first genuine smile she'd had in weeks. The party planner asked me yesterday what the theme was. I told her resurrection. She thought I meant religious, but I meant personal. This is my resurrection, Father. My rise from the ashes of a childhood that tried to burn me alive. What theme would you choose for your resurrection party? You know what's ironic, Father? The nursing home called yesterday. They said my father has been asking them to help him pick out a suit for the party. He's so certain he'll be there. The staff felt bad for him. This devoted father, whose daughter is having such a big celebration. They have no idea that this devoted father once told me on my 16th birthday that my mother would have been better off if she'd miscarried me. The cruelty of the memory still stung, even after all these years. But here's what I've learned, Father. Cruel people often die alone, surrounded by people they've fooled, but never anyone they've truly loved. My father will die believing he was a good man, and maybe that delusion is his punishment. Meanwhile, I'll be surrounded by genuine love, the kind he never knew how to give or receive. Margaret touched the door handle, ready to leave, then turned back one more time. The $240,000, Father? It's not about the money. It's about the statement. It's about saying I am worthy of celebration. It's about every dollar being a declaration that I matter, that my joy matters, that my healing matters. And if that makes me selfish, then I'll be selfish. I've been selfless my whole life, trying to earn love that was never going to come. She opened the door, letting light flood into the confessional. Thank you, Father, for listening, for not telling me to forgive and forget, for understanding that sometimes the most Christian thing you can do is protect yourself from those who would crucify you given the chance. Father Michael's voice followed her out. Go in peace, my child. Your celebration is not a sin. It's a sanctuary. Margaret walked out of the church, her heels clicking on the marble floor with new determination. Each step sounded like a declaration. I survived. I thrived. I choose joy. As she reached the church doors, her phone rang. It was her assistant, Mrs. Davidson. The venue just called. They need final confirmation on the guest count. It's 500, correct? Margaret looked back at the church, at the confessional where she'd left decades of pain, and smiled. Yes, 500 exactly. Not one more, not one less. And Sarah, make sure security has the photo I sent. Under no circumstances is that man to enter the plaza that night. Of course, Mrs. Davidson, anything else? Yes, actually. Add a line to the program, right after the toast. It should read, "This celebration is dedicated to all who choose healing over hatred, truth over facade, and love over obligation." She hung up and walked to her car, a luxury vehicle her father had said she'd never be able to afford. As she drove away, she thought about the party, about the guests who would fill the ballroom, about the speeches and the laughter and the joy. And for the first time, she didn't hear her father's voice telling her she didn't deserve it. 3 weeks later, the Plaza Hotel ballroom was transformed into a garden of white roses and gold accents. 500 guests in their finest attire mingled under crystal chandeliers, champagne flowing, orchestra playing, and at the center of it all stood Margaret, radiant in her designer gown, surrounded by her family. During her speech, she said something that made everyone stop and listen. Tonight, we celebrate not just 6 decades of life, but the choice to thrive despite those who would see us fail. We celebrate the family we choose, the love we cultivate, and the joy we create. And to those who couldn't be here tonight, by choice or by chance, we wish them peace in their own journey. The room erupted in applause. No one asked about her father. Everyone understood that sometimes the most powerful presence is an absence. Later that night, as Margaret danced with her grandson, he looked up at her and said, "Grandma, you look like a queen," and she replied, "No, sweetheart, I look like someone who chose to be free." Meanwhile, across town in a nursing home, an old man sat in his room wearing his best suit, waiting for a car that would never come. The staff felt sorry for him, this father whose daughter had forgotten him. They didn't know the truth. They didn't know that sometimes forgetting is the greatest gift you can give yourself. As the party continued past midnight, Margaret's daughter pulled her aside. "Mom, I need to tell you something. Grandpa called me today. He knows about the party. He said he's going to write you out of his will." Margaret laughed, really laughed, for the first time in years. "Sweetheart, he wrote me out of his will the day I was born a girl instead of a boy. The only difference is now it's on paper instead of just in his heart." The party continued until dawn, each moment a testament to resilience, each laugh a victory over silence, each embrace a choice to love despite being taught otherwise. When the last guest left and the sun rose over Manhattan, Margaret stood in the empty ballroom, still in her gown, surrounded by the remnants of celebration. Her husband found her there, tears streaming down her face. "Regrets?" he asked gently. "No," she said, "relief. For the first time in my life, I threw a party where every single person there actually wanted me to be happy. Do you know how rare that is? To be surrounded only by those who wish you well? What would that feel like for you? To know everyone in your presence genuinely celebrates your existence." The next day, the society pages were full of photos from the party. The event of the season, they called it. A celebration of life and success. Not one publication mentioned the absent father. It was as if he had never existed, which, in all the ways that mattered, he hadn't. A week after the party, Margaret received a letter. No return address, but she recognized the handwriting. She held it for a moment, then, without opening it, dropped it in the fireplace. Whatever words were in there, whatever manipulation or guilt or false apology, they turned to ash, just like her childhood had. But from those ashes, look what had grown. An empire, a family, a life worth $240,000 celebrations, and so much more. Her youngest grandchild asked her once why she had such a big party. "Because, my darling," she said, "sometimes you have to throw yourself the party no one else ever would. Sometimes you have to be your own fairy godmother, your own cheering section, your own proud parent." The child nodded as if this made perfect sense. And maybe it did. Maybe the simplest truths are the ones we complicate as we grow older. 6 months after the party, Margaret got word that her father had taken ill. Her siblings pressured her to visit, to make peace, to be the bigger person one more time. She sent flowers. Nothing more, nothing less. The card read simply, "Wishing you the peace you never gave me." He recovered, because men like him always do, sustained by spite and the need to have the last word. But Margaret had already had hers, spoken in champagne toasts and orchestra music, in the laughter of grandchildren who knew they were loved, in the success that bloomed, despite the salt he'd sown in her soil. The final irony came a year later. Her father published a memoir, self-published and distributed to anyone who would take a copy. In it, he portrayed himself as the long-suffering father of an ungrateful daughter, a man who sacrificed everything only to be abandoned in his old age. He dedicated it to Margaret, hoping she finds peace with her choices. Margaret's lawyers wanted to sue for defamation. Her publicist wanted to release a statement. Her siblings wanted her to respond, to defend herself, to set the record straight. Instead, Margaret threw another party. Smaller this time, just family and close friends. The theme? Living well is the best revenge. Because it is, isn't it? Living well, loving deeply, laughing freely. These are the ultimate responses to those who tried to diminish us. At that party, Margaret's eldest son stood to make a toast to my mother, who taught us that family isn't about blood, it's about choice, who showed us that strength isn't about never falling, it's about building something beautiful from the pieces, who proved that the best inheritance you can give your children isn't money or property, but the knowledge that they are worthy of love exactly as they are. The room raised their glasses, and in that moment, Margaret realized something profound. Her father had been wrong about everything, but most of all, he'd been wrong about this, that she needed him to be complete. She didn't. She never had. The $240,000 party had been worth every penny, not for what it proved to the world, but for what it proved to her, that she could celebrate herself without permission, without apology, without him. Years passed. The father grew older, more bitter, more alone. The daughter grew happier, more peaceful, more free. Sometimes the best endings aren't about reconciliation. Sometimes they're about recognition, recognizing that you can't heal in the same environment that made you sick. Margaret's story spread, whispered at society lunches, discussed at charity galas. Women approached her with their own stories, their own absent fathers or mothers, their own $240,000 parties that were really declarations of independence. "How did you do it?" they'd ask. "How did you choose yourself?" And Margaret would always answer the same way, $1 at a time, one decision at a time, one party at a time, until choosing myself became as natural as breathing, as necessary as breathing. Because that's what it is, really. Choosing yourself is choosing to breathe. The church still stands, St. Augustine's, where Margaret made her confession. Father Michael still tells the story, anonymously of course, of the woman who confessed to throwing a party without her father. He uses it in his sermons about forgiveness, but not the forgiveness you'd expect. Forgiveness, he says, sometimes means forgiving yourself for protecting your peace. It means forgiving yourself for not being the daughter or son someone wanted you to be, and instead being the person you needed to become. And what became of the $240,000? It wasn't about the money, never was. It was about the message. That message rippled out, touching lives Margaret would never know, inspiring celebrations she'd never attend, funding charities that helped children escape homes where love was conditional and cruelty was constant. The Plaza Hotel still talks about that party. The event planners, the servers, the musicians, they all remember the night when joy was palpable, when celebration wasn't performative but genuine, when every toast was heartfelt and every dance was freedom. There was something different about that party, the hotel manager would tell new staff. It wasn't just expensive, it was meaningful. Every detail had a purpose, every moment was intentional. It was like the host was writing a love letter to herself, and we all got to witness it. And isn't that what we all want? To witness someone choosing themselves fully, completely, expensively if necessary. To see someone say, "I am worth this joy, this celebration, this life." Margaret's grandchildren grew up knowing their worth wasn't negotiable, that love shouldn't hurt, that family is chosen as much as it's given. They threw their own parties, celebrated their own victories, and never once wondered if they deserved happiness. The cycle broken. The poison neutralized. The curse lifted, all for the price of one $240,000 party and the courage to not send one invitation. Some would say it was excessive. Others would say it was necessary. Margaret would say it was both, and that's okay. Sometimes healing is expensive. Sometimes freedom costs everything you have. Sometimes the best gift you can give yourself is the absence of someone who never wanted you to unwrap your potential. In her final years, Margaret often returned to St. Augustine's, not for confession but for contemplation. She'd sit in the same pew she'd occupied as a child, but now she felt peace instead of fear, love instead of longing. One day, a young woman sat beside her, crying quietly. Margaret recognized the tears. They were the tears of someone trying to decide whether to invite toxicity to their celebration. "It gets easier," Margaret said softly. The woman looked up, surprised. "Choosing yourself," Margaret continued. "It gets easier. The first time feels like betrayal. The second time feels like necessity. By the third time, it just feels like breathing. But what if I regret it?" the young woman asked. Margaret smiled, thinking of her party, of the joy and the laughter and the absence that made it all possible. "My dear, the only thing you'll regret is how long you waited to do it." As Margaret left the church that day, she passed the confessional where she'd made her decision. She touched the wood gently, a thank you to the space that had held her truth, and walked out into the sunlight. Her phone buzzed with a message from her granddaughter. "Grandma, I'm throwing myself a graduation party. Budget is $500, not $240,000, but the guest list is just as careful. Thank you for showing me it's okay to celebrate without explanation." Margaret smiled. The legacy continued, not in dollars, but in decisions. Not in wealth, but in wisdom. That night, she found the photo from her party. The one where she's standing in the center of the ballroom, surrounded by everyone who truly loved her. Her father's absence wasn't a shadow in the picture. It was the light that allowed everything else to shine. She framed it with a small plaque that read, "The party that cost $240,000 and was worth every penny." Because some things can't be measured in money. Some things can only be measured in the peace that comes from finally choosing yourself. And if that choice requires a confession to a priest, a $240,000 party, and the courage to not invite your father, so be it. After all, the best parties are the ones where everyone present actually wants you to be happy, the ones where absence is more powerful than presence, the ones where you finally dance free. What's your $240,000 party? What's the celebration you're denying yourself because someone told you that you didn't deserve it? Who's the person you're afraid to not invite, even though their presence would poison your joy? Think about it. And then when you're ready, throw the party anyway, because Margaret was right about one thing above all others. Living well isn't just the best revenge, it's the only revenge worth having. And sometimes that revenge costs exactly $240,000 and one uninvited father, the end. But really, it's just the beginning. The beginning of choosing yourself, of celebrating without permission, of recognizing that some confessions aren't about sin, but about finally telling the truth. Margaret's story continues. Not in these words, but in every person who reads this and thinks, maybe I don't have to invite them. Maybe I can choose my own joy. Maybe my party, whatever it costs, is worth it. Because it is, you are, and that's the real confession. Not that she didn't want her father at her party, but that she finally wanted herself there more. $240,000. 500 guests, one absent father, and the freedom that comes from finally understanding that the best gift you can give yourself is the absence of those who wish you were absent. What a party it was. What a party it could be. Your party. Your choice. Your confession. The priest is listening. The ballroom is waiting. The only question is, are you brave enough to not send that one invitation? Margaret was, and look how that turned out. Beautiful, isn't it? The sound of celebration without explanation. Joy without justification. A party without the one person who would have ruined it. That's the confession that changed everything. That's the $240,000 truth. That's the party everyone's still talking about. And now you know why. So, what do you think really happened here? Was Margaret wrong to exclude her father from her celebration? Have you ever had to make a similar choice between family obligation and personal peace? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story touched you, if it made you think about your own celebrations and who deserves to be there, please hit that like button and subscribe for more powerful stories about choosing yourself, breaking cycles, and the true cost of freedom. Remember, sometimes the most expensive party is the one where you pay the price of your own happiness. And sometimes the cheapest thing you can do is protect your peace, even if it costs $240,000 to do it. Thank you for being here, for witnessing Margaret's confession, and for perhaps seeing a bit of your own story in hers. Until next time. Remember, you are worth every celebration, every dollar, and every difficult decision it takes to protect your joy. What's your confession? What's your $240,000 party? And who won't you be inviting? The answers might just change your life, just like they changed Margaret's. Peace, love, and perfectly curated guest lists. This is your sign to throw the party. Send the invitations to everyone except that one person. Celebrate yourself without apology. Margaret did it. You can too. And that's the real confession. Not that we don't want certain people at our parties, but that we've waited so long to admit it. Don't wait. Your $240,000 party is calling. Answer it.